Hi everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be continuing our work on the Israeli AMX 13 here. As you can see, I think we're pretty much at the final stages, which is good. And in today's episode, we're going to focus on a few things to kind of wrap the build up. We're going to do the tracks. I stupidly forgot the tracks for the vehicle that I was going to do at home, but Dave was good enough to find a spare set of tracks here, so we'll go through that and I'll show you how to blacken the tracks and weather them and whatnot. I did the tracks on this side of the vehicle. As you can see here, as I rotate, we'll do these sides. So I'll do this on camera and then finish with the real tracks off camera. And then we're also going to do the muffler in here. And we're going to use the same technique that we used on the Brum bar by using the acrylic paints and then adding some pigment into it, a la Mike Rinaldi. And then the final thing we're going to do is go through, and I'll just pull the turret off here, is finish weathering the horizontal surfaces. So we spent a lot of time weathering the lower hull, the undersides, with pigment and oil paint and washes and whatnot, splashes. So we need to bring some of that up onto the upper surfaces of the vehicle just to harmonize everything and to make sure there's continuity. So we've done, I've done most of the turret off camera, and I've done kind of this side of the vehicle. I've left this side here to do it on camera, so we'll get it doing that. I'll show you how to do that. And then we'll also talk about some of the lads. I've done the knapsack here, the rucksack, whatever you want to call it, is done. I've got a little piece of string here. Actually, this is Easy Line, rope colored Easy Line that I'm using for this. We'll talk about that. I finished the barbed wire. I've got some spare, well, I did have some spare track links, so I'll talk about that another time, that I just took some spares from the Frual tracks that I was using before. I've got some posts in the back here that I've done, and I remember those were from the same razor wire set, and I've kind of put a couple of nails in one, painted one red and stressed it, painted another one blue and stressed it, just to get a little bit of color on the vehicle. And I think the last thing we did is I did finish the jerry can here, which I primed in aluminum, then did some hairspray on it, and then painted it with the same sand gray base that we have on the vehicle here, and then hairspray chipped it off. So I think we're at the the closing stages of the build here. There's a couple of antennas that'll go here that I'll use probably some fiber optic cable that I got from my friend Sandy. Put those up, paint those black, and then tie those down to these grab handles here. And I think we're pretty much done, which is good. Then we'll get on to doing the stug for the next set of videos. So yeah, so we'll kind of power through this. We'll start with the tracks, so we'll get that going. I use the MIG burnishing fluid here, and what I do is I pour that, and maybe let's put this aside to protect it over here. What I do is I pour it into a container, and you can see, and maybe when Robert gets closer in, you can see some of the residue here. But I basically pour the full contents of one of these into a container, a glass container, a plastic container will do. And then that's what I use to drop the tracks into. So this can be fairly, they recommend using gloves for this. So I have some surgical gloves here, courtesy of Sunnybrook Hospital from the last time I was there. I grabbed some with an appointment for my dad. So those will come in handy. So we'll dip this, and then we'll show you how to weather it and kind of get it the same look and feel as what we have on the left side of the vehicle here. So we'll get Rob to come in close, and we'll start attacking the tracks. Okay, so I've got my surgical gloves on and my rubber gloves. Although every time I see a pair of these, I always feel something real bad's about to happen. But anyway, okay. So again, thanks to Dave for finding a spare set of tracks. I'm not sure what vehicle these are for, but they're pretty close actually to what we have on the AMX 13 here. So simply what you do is ideally you would wash these prior to putting them in, scrub them with some soap and water. The reason for that is sometimes there's some release agent on the tracks, and if it's still there, the burnishing fluid will have trouble making contact. That'll kind of get in the way of it making contact with the metal, which is what you want. So simply take them, dip them in, and let them sit for a bit. And what you may want to do after a while is get an old stiff brush, and you want to make sure it's an old brush because I think this food will pretty much ruin any good brushes that you have. And you can start to kind of make sure, work it in, make sure that it's in. And this is where, you know, you get a pair of tweezers to kind of move it around. So just make sure there's no air bubbles that are preventing contact. All right, so we'll kind of leave that like so. Leave that like so. So we'll let that sit for a bit and give it some time, and then we'll come back to it. Usually it takes about a good 10 minutes, but you can see they're starting to change color already. So it doesn't take a lot of time, and you can see that it's the raised portions that seem to be turning. They seem to be kind of darkening first, and that's why kind of using the brush to get into the recessed portions is kind of key. And you can see the residue from the set of tracks that I did on the vehicle. So we'll just let that do its thing for a while. And we'll take a bit of a pause off camera, and then we'll check back in a few minutes. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes in here, and I've been every now and again I've been kind of going after it with the brush here, and you can see that we're certainly getting there, but there are some areas where, you know, recessed in there where it hasn't quite taken yet. So we'll give it another few minutes at least. But it is doing its job, and they do look pretty good. They do look pretty good. It's a great way of getting a good base down for subsequent. Now, just because you do this, there's more work to do. We're going to work with some of our pigment here, get that in, and make sure that you know it harmonizes with the rest of the vehicle in terms of the weathering. But this is this is really just to get a good base of color. Now you could spray paint these, I guess, prime them, which might, you know, some people might be an easier process to go through. The nice thing about this is that it does give a variation of color, and it does look, you know, it looks pretty, you know, even in this early stage, it does look pretty nice. It's pretty varied, pretty realistic. I guess some of the pins that were used to fasten the links together, you know, it's affected some of them. Others it hasn't done as good a job on, so we'll address that. But it does give a nice natural finish. And even in the time that we've been talking here since we came back and checked this in here, we can see that it's already darkened some more. So we're probably coming up on about the 8-minute mark now. So you can see it doesn't take very long to do. Now it's important selecting the right container. So these tracks are fairly shallow or narrow, I guess. But if you're doing panther or tiger tracks or king tiger tracks, and you've got them coiled up, you're going to want to use maybe a smaller container. I've used drinking glasses before, smaller drinking glasses to drop everything in, just to kind of maximize the use of the fluid. And I think one of these will get you probably at least a couple, 3, maybe 4 sets of tracks before it loses its efficacy. So, you know, these things are anywhere from, you know, $12, $15, depending on the Canadian funds. I don't know what they'd be in the U.S. or in Europe, but you know, and there's different brands. There's you know, AK has their own brand, MIG has their own brand. There's the old Black in It, which I've used in the past. So you can, you know, they're pretty readily available at your better hobby shop. So I think we're getting close to the point where we can pull these out. Yeah, so if you look here, most of it's done. There's still some areas where it hasn't quite taken, but I'll show you how to adjust those. Those aren't a problem. But yeah, I don't think we want them much darker than that. So the thing to do is to take them out of the fluid here and then to put them into water. Now some people say use soapy water or whatnot. I just use water. The fluid will still work a little bit. It's kind of like taking something out of the oven and letting it sit for a bit. It's still going to cook for a little bit with all the residual heat. So the intent is to try and get as much of the fluid off as possible. Just give it a good shake, a good wiggle in there. But you can see it's a pretty nice, varied, kind of rusty, dark brown, metally type of color. So I'm pretty happy with that. So let's take that, put that onto a paper towel, and then we're just going to let that dry. So in the interest of time, what I might do is just kind of fold it over and just kind of press down, just to try and take off as much of the moisture as possible. Try it again from this side. And we'll just let it air dry for a bit. So what we'll do is while this is drying, we'll move and do some of the other things that we were talking about doing on the vehicle. Set that aside. We'll cover up our water rinse here and our burnishing fluid here. Get these horrible things off. I hate wearing these things. There we go. Breathe again. And we'll start doing some weathering on the vehicle here. So what we might do is just take a quick pause and just get the lights set up so that we can see everything properly, and we'll get right to it. Okay, so now while we're letting the tracks dry, and if I wanted to, I could probably take a hair dryer to them and dry them quick, or blow them out with an airbrush, or even clean them with an airbrush. Robert was saying off camera, you could probably spray water on them and kind of power wash the burnishing fluid off. Yeah, you could absolutely do all those types of things. I'll just let it dry here and take advantage of the time and jump to other things to do on the vehicle, which I'm sure a lot of you could also do when you're working on your own. So to get back to this, so the key thing with any vehicle when you're doing a lot of weathering, and you probably know by now, I love to weather my vehicles. I think a good weathering adds a lot of realism to the vehicle. And kind of gives it some, kind of situates it somewhere on the battlefield. And I just think I just love the way a good weathered vehicle looks. So one of the key things is to make sure that that's consistent, and that when you're, and we've talked about this, and I'm sure we talked about the Sherman, the Brumbar, and I will talk about it here. It's to make sure that it's consistent, meaning that if you spend a lot of time weathering, the lower hull of the vehicle, but you have nothing up top, it doesn't look right. Vehicles going through a theater of war, or even training exercises, if you look online, you look at videos, they get pretty dirty, and they get dirty all over. Obviously, the higher up you go in the vehicle, the less dust and mud and splashes you're going to see, but they're still in effect, right? So as the higher up you go in the vehicle, it kind of reduces, but you still have to do something. So what I've done here on the turret, and my new favorite thing to use for this type of thing are these oil brushers. So I've got a few of them in my collection now, and I've got this one medium soil, and the reason why I picked this one up is because it matches very closely with the pigment color that we're using. It's a little bit, just a tad bit darker, which is good, but it works well in that it's in that same palette of color. So, and I used to look at these things and think they were pretty gimmicky. But then I tried a couple, and they're extremely convenient. And that's the thing. I mean, you can use oil paints and whatnot, and everybody, including myself, has a drawer full of oil paints. But these things are pretty convenient. They're very convenient for doing this type of thing, and they're kind of they're kind of like the wilder paints, I guess, where they dry fairly quick. They dry matte, or they seem to dry matte anyways, my experience. But if you're using this, you're really kind of paying for convenience, but that's okay. I don't mind paying for a little bit of convenience. So what I do is I take a little bit of paint, and if you see what I've done here, is I've just kind of applied some, and the intent here is to get an effect where you have dust building up randomly on your horizontal panel. So I've kind of done it here on this side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to replicate that same thing over here. And what I'm going to do, I'll turn this over so we can get some good light on it, is I'm just going to drop a dot of paint. Like that. It's kind of like a dot method. Get it up there. And you might have maybe a little bit more on the outside because again, the outer surface would be kind of probably more exposed to dust than the inner surface, like that. And then I'm going to let that dry for a few minutes. Again, very convenient to use. And we'll get some thinner ready. And again, I just use the oilless thinner, enamel thinner. Just got a little bit in here. And then we'll get kind of a good blending brush. We'll just wet. And we'll kind of steal this tissue here. Find a dry part of the tissue. And just unload most of the thinner so that your brush is pretty dry. And then all we're going to do is start stippling. Now it's still a little bit wet. Back here looks like it's dried a bit more. So I like to let it dry just a bit, but don't let it dry overnight because if you do that, it'll be harder to do. And we'll start maybe back here. Just start stippling this in. And what you're kind of doing is you're just kind of diffusing. And it's as easy as that. So you can just imagine this vehicle rolling through the Golan Heights, hitting a bit of a dusty area, and all these plumes of dust being kicked up by this vehicle and maybe vehicles ahead of it or whatnot, just kind of settling down and on these horizontal surfaces here. And that's it. That's really all you have to do. It's as simple as just again, stippling is the key, right? Let's clean the brush off a bit. Unload it. And so before, when I was saying let these, you can let it dry. I mean, let it dry for maybe 15, 20 minutes, not more than that. Like the wilder paints, the wilder oils, these oil brushes will dry fairly quickly. Now what you may want to do, so now that that's done, is you may want to go back and get some pigment. And just pick up a bit. You don't need a ton. And you might want to just start stippling some in. Just to give it a bit of a kind of build on the effect. That's a bit much, eh? Now you might only want to do this kind of on the outer edges, just because that's where you'd have build up. And then if I wanted to go back after it with the oil brusher, I could. Let's say, oh, I just feel I want to add a little bit more color. So you can kind of stack these. Just maybe a bit there, maybe a little bit more there, right? And then you can start stippling, or maybe just start. Maybe go back after it with the brush. And we'll get rid of the excess. So the nice thing about this is that you can take this off fairly easily. Just by loading your brush. No, I'll do it here because I'm happy with the effect, but you can load your brush with thinner and just kind of brush it all off. But I think we're pretty happy with the effect so far. So you can see it can be a very iterative process, meaning you can start with the oils, you can work them in, you go at it with some pigments, you can add more oils to it, you can add pigments after that. Always start with the oils though, because you kind of need a base for the pigments to adhere to. Maybe that's working. That's a bit too much. And then you can kind of do your fine-tuning adjustments with a slightly moistened brush. And I think you're done. So maybe now what we'll do is, I haven't really paid much attention to this area, and at least around here. Now you got to think, okay, why is there dirt and dust here? On the sides, it's probably just because of the accumulation as the vehicle is moving. But crew would also track dust and dirt and whatnot. So I think, as I did here on the turret, kind of where the crew would get up on the vehicle and whatnot, you'd probably want to make sure that you're putting some dirt and dust. And we did this, I think, very prominently on the Sherman. A little bit less on the Brumbar, but I figured I'd build it in here, and just to give just an accumulation of dust. So we'll do the same thing around this hatch here. So we'll go back again, get our, and this one for those following is the medium soil color, which is a good match for the mix of pigments that we've used here. And these oil paints, these oil brushes are convenient. So we'll just put a little dab there, down there. Maybe a little bit up here, a little bit around. Maybe as the crew is getting in and around here. That's a bit much, but anyway, if you make a big blob like that, you can go back and fix it. It's not a problem. All right, get them. Now, be careful because these are glass periscopes, so you don't want to get anything on it necessarily. We'll just do a little bit here just to harmonize things. Maybe down here a bit, just a couple, just to bring it together. So I've already done some down here. And you can see here's the easy line that I'm going to use to attach the rucksack. So this is the rope colored version, which is kind of looks more pink. But what we'll do is we'll add maybe a bit of a wash to it, a brown wash, to kind of bring the color back. We'll do that after. So now what we'll do is we'll do the same thing. Get a moisten your brush with some odorless thinner. And I do like to let it dry just a little bit, but for the sake of filming here, we'll just maybe start attacking some of these. And you just like you did up here, you're just stippling. And you're just trying to give a hint of random dust buildup on the. Well, this isn't exactly a horizontal, but you know what I mean. And you put, it looks like you put a lot on, but you can see that as you work it in, a lot of it goes away. A lot of it gets picked up by the brush. And then you can move it around, which is what I'm doing here. I'll do a little bit up here. So we might leave this hatch, maybe just add, just with the residue, just put a little bit on it but it won't be as prominent, you might say, as what some of the other surfaces are. Again, if you're going on the theory that, it's crew members that are kind of tracking this up on the vehicle as they're climbing over in it, getting in and out of it, servicing it, etc. So while that's still a little bit wet, let's take advantage. Let's put some pigments on there. So again, take most of it off. And just start. And pick up a little bit more. So you can see how easy that is. Like that took all of a couple, 3 minutes, and you have a nice effect. So let's go and attack these. And pick up some more thinner. So the more thinner you have on your brush, the more oil paint you're gonna take off. Let's go down here and just diffuse these guys. Actually, you know what we might do? Maybe let's put some on the tool here. As much as I hate to cover up, maybe just a bit there, because the tool, again, the same thing, you're going to want to have your tools have the same, like, why would they be any different? They're going to be subjected to the same dust. So now let's pick up some pigment. So I always like, when I'm doing this, I always kind of like to add it where, your crew would be kind of clambering over the vehicle. They're the ones that are kind of bringing this stuff up on the tank. Let me just blow this off. And if you wanted to further mute the effect, again, all right, just stipple this in just to blend it. Now what we may want to do after this is go in and put some oil stains and whatnot around the hatches here and maybe in the back. But yes, as you can see, I think that looks, I think that looks pretty good. I missed a couple of on the backs of the periscopes here. So the longer the paint dries, and it doesn't, yeah, maybe even just 5 minutes is enough. The longer it dries, you know, the harder it's going to be to move around. So you don't want to let it dry too long. And I think that looks pretty good. Off camera, what I did is just to experiment in here, I just put in a bunch of different color dark brown. Again, I was using all the same oil brusher paints. I used some Starship Base Sludge. I used some dark brown. I used some of the Starship Filth. And these two colors are really good, the Starship Bay Sludge and the Starship Filth are really good colors. And I even put a little bit of bright rust in there. You can't really see it, the effect is lost. This is actually called Red Tile, but I kind of use it as a bright, obnoxious rust color. And just kind of work it in, the same type of thing. Kind of work it in just to give it a bit of a kind of a grimy feel. I might carry that back here a bit. But I think, materially speaking, you know, I think we're, you know, let's put the turret on. Let's give it, you know, let's see how that harmonizes. And I think that looks pretty good. So I think from a weathering standpoint, I think we're pretty happy with how this is looking. So I think we're done. Maybe just a couple of areas to touch up and whatnot. But maybe like I might want to pay, like it's kind of hidden by the rear part of the turret, but I might pay a little bit more attention to the rear deck. Although you really can't see it. I might do something here around, let's pull that off and get that out of harm's way. So I think the turret is largely done. The only thing that's left to do is the machine gun and the two antennae. Everything else I think is pretty much done. So I think the turret's good, so we'll put that aside, keep that safe over here. And maybe what we'll do is we'll pay a little bit of attention to the and I might want to, this is where I might want to add a little bit of color here. So this is called Red Primer, but it looks like a good basic rust color for me. So what I might do is just add a couple of dots of this color around here, and then also add in a little bit of a bright, obnoxious orange. And we'll give that a minute to dry and see what that looks like. In the meantime, it looks like the tracks are done. So we can see that there's just a little bit in the kind of the recessed areas of the front face of the track that haven't taken. But you can see how it gives a nice kind of rusty effect, which I think looks pretty good. Kind of a random, and you can see even like link to link, it's different. So that's why, I mean, yeah, you can paint it, but using the burnishing fluid, I think gives that nice element of randomness that, you know, just adds a level of realism to it. So I think we can go ahead and start working on that. But let's finish off with this guy first. So we'll put that back over here. Let's get our brush. Okay, let's see how well this little experiment works. Now again, the nice thing about this is if this turns out horrible, we can get rid of it. And first impressions are not great. This may be a bad idea. But just to show you that you can, so what you want to make sure you take it off of the cap itself. I'm assuming this is some type of armored fuel cap. Again, I should know my vehicle anatomy a little bit better than I do here, but let's try and diffuse this out and see if maybe bring some of it down here where it would leak. Now, why would this rust? Well, that's a good question. I bet there's a bunch of realists out there that are kind of groaning at this, saying, why would you rust this out? And my response would be, this is artistic license. Maybe bring it down the side just a bit and just drag it down the side like that. Now, the reason why I'm doing this, it is artistic license, but just to add another splash of color to the vehicle itself. Let's get a finer brush to get rid of that. I think part of the problem is I probably put too much oil paint on, but again, you can work at it with and just kind of diffuse it. So maybe not too bad in the end. But it wasn't looking good for a while. And again, if you wanted to harmonize it with, you know, maybe bring in some pigments, because again, you know, as the if you had a wet area, that would certainly be a magnet for any dust and whatnot. And that would further diffuse the color. Try and clean up the cap a bit. And you want the effect to be kind of underneath the cap, or so I think, yeah, that's not too bad. Some of you are probably thinking, where is this guy going with this? To be fair, I was thinking that for a few minutes myself, but I think that looks good. Again, just a bit of a different variation. So after some consultation, Dave had a good idea of adding a little bit of dark brown to this, so let's do that. So let's add just a touch. Let's not go crazy, because that'll obliterate what we have there. And let's get I don't know if that's helping or making it worse. Again, it's focusing on just little areas like this that can really make a bit of a difference. And again, if you can get somebody to stop and look at your model, and just keep their eye on it a little bit longer than they might otherwise. And that's a good thing. Especially if you're competing, right? Because you want to, if you have judges looking at your model, you want them to, you know, pay, oh, look what he did there. He took the extra time to do that. And sometimes that's all it takes to make yours stand out from somebody else's. Because nowadays, again, everybody's up their game. And let's go back and diffuse this a little bit more. So the nice thing, again, the nice thing about these oil paints is they do stay pliable for a fair bit. There. I think that looks pretty good. Oh, I made a clean spot now. See, you just touch something. Let's go back in with that. All right, we'll let that dry. Come back to it. Okay, so let's get on to the tracks. So let's put this aside. Now, when you're working with these, the first thing you need to do is to address the white metal bits that haven't been attacked by that the burnishing fluid hasn't gotten to for whatever reason. And for this is where acrylics come in a little bit handy. So what I like to do is use my old trusty German camouflage black brown, which is a great chipping color. And I'll just squeeze a bit here. And what I do is I just paint the inside of those. That looks a little bit dark, but I won't worry about it too much because you're going to be jamming pigment and stuff into these things. And maybe, yeah, there we go. Now, you could do a better job of matching the color. But at the end of the day, with everything, all the other effects you're going to be putting on this, it really doesn't make too much of a difference. Now, what you could do as well is, again, so I found I was using this color to paint some of the metal stick or the wooden sticks or posts or whatnot, and I found that this was a pretty good base for the pigment color. So these life color paints are great because the pigment never settles in them. I don't know what they do. I don't know what magic they have, but you can also kind of touch them up like so. And all you're looking to do is just kind of hide any bits of white metal that are popping through. Right. Okay, here, maybe just a bit in there. So if you have, yeah, just use some, and I think acrylics are probably better for this than anything else. Maybe go back to pick up some of the brown. Again, you don't have to be too perfect with this. Color that pin off there. Maybe go back to this. Kind of mix it in, blend it a bit. Kind of blending on the fly here. Mixing two kind of paints together. What could possibly go wrong, right? And it's usually the exact same thing happened with the tracks that I have on the vehicle now. The same problem. Now I suppose if I would have left the tracks in longer, these areas probably would have gotten addressed, but then everything's too dark at that point. So you're just kind of just touching up the areas here. Just making sure. There we go. And then if you want to address any pins on the side, you can do that. Just to knock the shine back. Maybe doing that might be better with a darker color. Just touching it, just to okay, that's probably good enough. Okay, so now that we've, you look at it in a different light, you find a bunch of more spots. So it's just it's really just trying to, and again, you don't have to be too perfect because you're going to be covering up a lot of this with pigment, but you do want to get rid of any of the obvious spots. Okay, I think that's probably good enough. So now what you do is you want to give this the same treatment. Now, if we were working in a let's say a vehicle that was serving in a more temperate climate, northwestern Europe, Russia, what have you, this would be the first step where you would be applying kind of the mud. And there would be splashes and whatnot, but because of where this vehicle served and it being in more of a desert, arid type of environment, really we just need to work in some dust. So from a weathering standpoint, it's actually a little bit easier. There's less heavy lifting to do. And what you do here is just get an old crappy brush that you've cut back. And just start working this stuff in. You can see by virtue of doing this, it doesn't really matter. And I can, I'm seeing bits of white metal there, but hopefully this will get covered up by the tracks here. We'll do that. These are old. I think Dave was saying these are 38. Or Panzer 38 tracks, which are very similar to what's on the vehicle now. And don't need a ton, but you do want to put some in there. There you go. And then we go to our trusty, I'll close this paint up before it dries out. And then with our trusty X20A applicator, just Let's go about fixing the pigment there. There we go. So we'll let that dry. And then we'll take some, well, then we'll pay some attention to the other side. But we'll let that dry first. So while we're letting that dry, actually just get access to the water here. Clean this brush off before. Okay, so for the muffler, we're going to use the same technique that we use in the Brum Bar, where we're going to use the Life Color paints. They're from their Rust set. We have 4 different tones, lightest to darkest. We'll start with the light, apply that, then work this on the next color, then the next color, then the last color, which is the darkest one, and then we'll go after it with some pigments. So again, same rinse and repeat of what we did with the Brum Bar. So I've got a brush moistened with water, and I'm just going to get some of the palette over here. So you want it fairly translucent, like that. That should be enough for the muffler. Let's close this up. Get rid of the bits of dry paint. Get my eyes on, and the same type of thing, right? So you're just kind of working this in kind of a random way. Now this is a little bit hard to get at because it's underneath. Oops. I don't know what that to happen. There we go. Now we'll let that dry, and then we'll go after it with the next color, and we'll start getting that queued up. So this is the Light Rust Shadow. The next color is the Rust Light Shadow. Which is the next color up. So the same type of thing, we'll just get a little bit onto our palette. And we'll get some and we'll start going at it. Dry enough, I think. You just cover random areas. I don't have to cover everything. I just cover random areas. Now the inside of this will get a good hit of like soot pigment, black smoke pigment, or oily pigment, or and then we also have pigments to come. So the next color is Rust Base Color. I mean, you could do this with oils too. Same type of thing. you're kind of replicating the same effect where you're there you go. Now the nice thing about this though is that it leaves some of the base, like the sand gray color come through. And then the last color in the series is the Rust Dark Shadow. Again, this is all part of their, I bought this set way back when, their dust and rust diorama set. So there's 4 rust colors and 2 dust types. I haven't really used the dust paint as much, but the rust colors are pretty good. So let's go and pick up some of the... Okay, then we'll start tackling this on here. So this is the darkest one, the darkest color. Like so, so I think it looks pretty. So it's rusty, but it's not too rusty. So you can still see elements of the base color come through. So I think we're pretty happy with that. Clean the brush. And then now what we'll do is we'll go in with some pigments. Maybe do them in the same order, the lightest first. And this I would do just very sparingly because I don't... When we did this on the Brumbar, so this is the, what is this, the Ochre Rust? Yeah, Ochre Rust from MIG. So I've had these forever, and this is way back. The initial release of the MIG pigments. So it just goes to show you how long they last. And then just... make sure your hands are clean. This is where gloves might come in handy again. Just go in and just add, kind of hard to see, but so we're building up a good effect. I have a feeling these pigments, we might be back and forth on them a bit, but just kind of use them. This is nice. This is their standard rust color. This is a really nice rust. This is where you might want to get a bit of another brush and just kind of stipple and blend. Stipple and blend. There you go. Looks pretty good. I think it looks. And what I might do is I might do a bit of a wash, a dark wash on it, or maybe even with some darker oil paints, and just, you know, where those reinforcing bars are, or ribs on the muffler here, just add a little bit of shadow to them, just to give it a little bit more of a. Oops. And then the last color is their Old Rust, which is a nice dark maroony rust color. And again, you don't need a ton. Make sure the hands are clean. And just kind of. There we go. And the same thing, we'll kind of blend that in a bit. There. Pretty nice. Yeah, there you have it. There's a nice rusted muffler. So we'll just add a little bit of soot to this area here where the exhaust is, the actual, where all the smoke comes out. Maybe add a little bit of darker color to the reinforcing ribs. And we can get back to our track. We're at the final stages. So if you look at the track, you can see there's a nice, you know, the pigments slowly drying. But then what we want to do now is we want to burnish it. Not burnish it, but maybe sand it a little bit. Just to, and the reason why you want to do that is because, you know, bring this vehicle into it here, is you can see I've kind of sanded the raised areas. So these are the areas that would make contact with the ground continually. And so you want to show them. So that's the nice thing about using metal tracks, is it allows you to do that. And you can see where, you know, there's some sand and dirt and dust in some of them, and not a lot. Again, it's a desert environment, so it won't get too beat up, or, you know, there won't be too much mud and dirt and pigment on it. So now all you have to do is just, with an old sander, and it doesn't take much, just go and sand the raised areas. Let's try this one here. This is a soft. This is a fine grit. You don't want to use anything more than fine. You don't need much more than that. There you have it. You get a nice shine to it, nice metallic shine. And that's really all you need. Now, if you were in a different type of climate, you'd go a little bit muddier, a little bit dirtier, but the process is pretty much the same. I mean, probably, I haven't decided what we're going to do on the Stug yet in terms of the tracks, but if we do metal tracks, which I'd probably be sorely tempted to do to get the nice sag for the Panzer III chassis, you know, we'll do a lot more of this. But there, nice, realistic looking tracks, and it really didn't take all that long. And then you would do the same thing on the other side. Just apply the pigment, fix it. Here, though, what you want to make sure you do is, maybe because this area would make contact with the rubber road wheels, you probably want to maybe brush in like a dark brown colored pigment, just to denote that, you know, there is constant wear and tear. And that what you'd want to do on the teeth is give them a bit of a sanding too. Oops, use the right side of it. So again, you know, this is 800 grit, just to show wear and tear where this would meet. You know, the drive sprocket. Same thing on the inside. So having something thin like this is good. You can use an old piece of sandpaper, fold it up, but make sure it's fine. Don't use anything. You don't need anything stronger than fine. Maybe the tops of them. There. That's all you need to do. Done. Do the same thing on this side. Now, for the sake of time, I didn't do the pigment, but you do the same type of pigment thing here. But again, you have to remember, you know, get maybe a bit of a dark track going in here with some dark colored pigment to denote the wear and tear of the rubber on the track surface. But easy. done. Didn't take very long at all. And you can see now that all those areas that we're showing, because of what we did with the pigment, all those little white metal areas are now hidden. So with the combination of the paint and the pigment, you know, you'd be hard pressed to find them. So very simple, very easy way of working with metal tracks. So that'll probably conclude the set of videos on the AMX13. I'll probably have one last, maybe a bit of a show and tell when everything's put together. And we'll probably do that maybe when we kick off the Stug 3 build. So I'll need a little bit of time to start putting that together, but that'll be the next thing in the hopper. So yeah, we'll have just one last final go around, and I'll talk about some of the things that I did off camera, and I'll have the other tracks on. The rucksack will be all nice and tied up and secured. We'll have this. We'll darken this a little bit with a wash to make it make it less pink and more taupey or more brown. We'll have the sticks on the back. We'll have some spare tracks on the front. But yeah, I think she's materially done. So thanks everybody for that. Thanks all of you that watched and stuck with the build. I really appreciate it. And thank you again for all of the great feedback people have been providing in the comments section. It seems that you know, you guys like the set of videos, and that means a lot to Dave and I and Robert. Because you know, if you guys weren't out there watching it, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for us to be here doing this type of thing. So we love doing it. We love the fact that you know, you guys seem to be learning something from it, and enjoy it as much as we like doing these videos. So thank you very much. We'll see you next time.